Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for November 2nd, 2022. Well, we're poised for a new announcement from Federal Reserve officials of hiking interest rates probably another 3/4 of a point. They believe that higher interest rates will tame inflation. Well, how does it do it? By crashing the economy. At the same time, the Biden administration is using war to create the illusion of an economic recovery by channeling large amounts of funds into military production under the doctrine that's being adopted of great power competition in the national security determination. So what we're seeing here is the intersection of failed economic policies and utopian military planners. This is what former President Dwight Eisenhower warned us about in 1961. I think it was his last address, when he warned of the effects of what he called the military-industrial complex. While we see the military-industrial complex as a broader grouping than just defense contractors, he was absolutely right that the takeover of policy from the citizens and putting it in the hands of special interests is what we're seeing with the so-called anti-inflation policy. Inflation is continuing at the highest level in decades, since the 1980s. And this is what's behind the Federal Reserve officials planning today to have another rate hike when they have their meeting this afternoon. The 12-month average of inflation from August 2021 to August 2022 is 8.3%. Now that's the official rate. The real rate is much higher. Just check your grocery bill, your utility bills, your rent and mortgage payments and medical bills. They're much higher than 8.3%. But the whole idea behind raising interest rates to fight inflation is to cool down demand. And this comes in conjunction with other aspects which are actually much more effective in cooling demand. Supply chain problems, shortages of goods. The idea is if you have no money, you won't buy things, and somehow that will slow down inflation. But what people do is if they have access to it, they use credit cards and just increase the total volume of debt. Now, the shortages of the food prices are going to continue to skyrocket due to the shortages of fertilizer. And this has a lot to do with NATO's war drive against Russia, as well as sanctions. And it's threatening worldwide food production. And the recent attack on the Russian ships in the harbor of Sevastopol is also threatening food distribution, as the Ukrainians, likely with British help, undertook this mission, causing the Russians to shut down the emergency food shipments. And then they blamed that on the Russians, though it was the Ukrainians who violated the agreement for a safe channel of passage. And then finally, the energy shortages. They blame them on Putin, but it has to do much more with the Green New Deal, which is a war on fossil fuels and efficient energy production technologies. There's, for example, a shortage of diesel fuel, which is threatening transportation of goods both on oceanic shipping and trucking. And don't forget, they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And the question of whether there was a message from Liz Truss to Blinken saying it's done, that's an important question to answer, because it's obvious that the destruction of the Nord Sea pipeline was an attack on Germany and Russia. And who benefits from that? Well, this is the old strategy of British geopolitics. Add to this the net effect of Biden's so-called Build Back Better green radicalism and the anti-energy green policy of the European Union. And what's the result? It's not just cooling inflation, it's deindustrialization. And it's led by population reduction ideologues in the German Green Party, which is in the German government. These are hypocrites. First, they destroy efficient energy production. Then they desperately seek short-term energy sources from the Middle East or from continuing to keep on the nuclear plants for another 3 months. But the net effect is to destroy the high-tech, energy-intensive industrial and agricultural systems in Germany, which have been the engine of growth for Europe. So it begs the question, freezing people and starving them to fight inflation? There must be a better way. Now, yesterday I reported on what the financial oligarchs are moving towards, a military buildup to protect Western nations from Putin and Xi Jinping. The 2022 U.S. National Defense Strategy Document, which has not gotten much reporting or coverage in the United States, commits the United States to fighting wars against both Russia and China. It doubles down on the previous defense strategy documents, which have asserted that we're in a new era of major power competition. Forget the war on terror, we now have to take on Russia and China. This is built on the Russophobia behind the US-NATO-Ukrainian war, which at this point is stuck in a refusal to negotiate. But it adds an additional factor, which is it now adopts this new document, strategy document, adopts a nuclear first strike strategy. This is something which Biden said he would never do. This goes against international agreements. But the U.S. now has an official policy of a first strike nuclear capability, and they're working on developing it, even as the people who are doing this are accusing Russia of intending to launch a nuclear war. The second aspect of this is it justifies ever larger defense budgets, at the same time wartime austerity for populations. In other words, billions of dollars for Zelensky and his legions of neo-Nazi war criminals and fanatics, while the goal of this is not freedom and democracy for the Ukrainians who are being sacrificed for the real goal, which is to destroy Russia and prevent Russia from leading a break from the unipolar order. And this break from the unipolar order is well underway, being driven by agreements for multilateral cooperation of regional institutions such as the BRICS, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Forum, and so on. Now, the idea of attacking Russia and China, who are looking for a way out from the failed policies of the unipolar order, that's not a recipe for an economic recovery. We're going to see more debt defaults coming. We're going to see job losses, shortages of necessary goods, all under the rubric of fighting inflation. But what does this ensure? It ensures higher profits for financial corporations, banks, and so on, and higher profits for the firms that are part of the military-industrial complex. And remember, this is not just defense contractors, although they certainly get the first tranche, but it includes the multiple institutions of mercenary forces, of consulting firms in Washington, D.C., as well as those firms which benefit from increased arms expenditure. So this is the kind of jobs program that only a lunatic would love. And unfortunately, there are many lunatics in both parties of the Congress who are totally committed to continuing to support this. Now, there are alternatives, and let me just start by mentioning some breaking news. One of the candidates who represents an alternative for this, Diane Sayer, the independent LaRouche candidate for Senate in New York, has just appeared in the most recent poll. In other words, they finally included her in a poll, and she showed up with 5.1%. This is with no coverage in the media. This is with censoring her and keeping her out of a debate, and yet she still showed up as a third party or independent candidate with 5.1%. Imagine if she had some coverage. And remember, she's running against Chuck Schumer, who is one of the leading figures in the Democratic Party, pushing for more war spending. Now, the other announcement I have, which is toward an alternative, is that the Schiller Institute will be sponsoring a conference on November 12th under the title, The Physical Economy of the Noosphere, Reviving the Heritage of Vladimir Vernadsky. Vernadsky was a Ukrainian Russian, a scientist, a philosopher, whose ideas about the intersection of the inorganic, organic, and noetic processes have been influential in shaping the ideas of Lyndon LaRouche. At this conference, you'll have experts in the real field of physical economy discussing what it is that drives the real economy, namely the creative powers of human beings, creative powers at uncovering the laws of the universe, of the physical universe, and applying those new discoveries to physical processes to increase that which is available to allow for the further development of the human race. This is the way you address an economic problem, not by war, not by austerity. So we'll have an announcement that will be posted in the description section in the future. I don't have it yet because it's not out, but as soon as we get it, keep your eye on our site for information on this. That's my report for today. I'll see you again tomorrow.